Dortiga Marie har min sympati, hon är toppen. Hon fullgör sin plikt ut i sitt distrikt med hela kroppen. Hon har inga krav, lider inte av divalater. Tar upp i sin säng herreman och dräng, bönder och soldater. Baram, bam, bam, baram, bam, bam, bam. Men det ska vara stil, lägenhet och bil ska det vara.
Number 7. The Swedish, Dutch singer, songwriter, poet Cornelis Vreeswijk. Or the Dutch pronunciation would be Vreeswijk, but he was always known as Vreeswijk with the Swedish pronunciation here. A wise man once said, there should be a bounty on those who try to imitate the singing of Cornelis Vreeswijk. And I feel that I can agree with that now, since the very special style of singing and guitar playing that Cornelis Vreeswijk got famous for is a bit too easy to sloppily imitate. And I think most of us here in Sweden have heard too many of those poor carbon copy troubadours. Still, when I started learning how to play the guitar way back in the 1980s, you may see it there behind me. It wasn't that guitar, but it's a guitar. Don't mess with me. Yeah, back in the 80s, I often played songs by Cornelis Vreeswijk myself, but hopefully without thinking I was Cornelis Vreeswijk, like many others did, alas. Anyway, one of the most popular songwriters and poets in Sweden was Cornelis Vreeswijk, and few have been more frequent in the Swedish media during his 50-year long or short life. Well, even after it ended, to be honest. A couple of years ago there was even a movie produced about his life, and even if it can as best be described as so quality wise, there's nothing so about Cornelis Vreeswijk's art history. He was born in the Netherlands and moved to Sweden with his family when he was 13 years old. When he recorded his first album in 1964, Ballader och oförskämdheter, for the Metronome label, it created sensation in Sweden. His album was filled with very well written songs with politically and socially related lyrics. It was something totally new to the Swedish record buying public. All his albums in the 1960s were brilliant, and everything looked just fine and dandy, but if it wasn't for the fact that he couldn't really take care of money, and alas not his private life either, since he was drinking heavily and not that interesting in paying taxes and handle money. And those two things would create problems for the rest of his life. He switched from Metronome to Philips in the early 1970s and began a Dutch career as well, by making records with songs in Dutch that were fairly successful. But he still was most successful in Sweden. When he refused to pay taxes, he could after a while not stay at the Philips label either, since all his income from record sales went directly to pay his tax debts. So he kept on making records for different labels with various results up until his death in 1987. Even though I have to say that even his worst records are quite good. I mean, they're not horrible in any way. Well, one of them where they try to make him hip and modern by placing all these 1980s sounding synthesizers and shit. That turned into a quite poor album, but that wasn't Cornelis Vreeswijk's fault, because it was probably not his idea of how his records should sound. But it sold well, so it was good for him anyway. It was not until a couple of years after his death in 1987 that he finally was free from his tax debt, since artists in Sweden had raised money through the sales of a double album with the Swedish artist Elite, where they had recorded some of his songs. Shortly thereafter, a scholarship to Cornelis Vreeswijk's memory was founded and awarded to musicians and songwriters. For some years there was even a Cornelis Vreeswijk museum in the old part of Stockholm in Gamla stan. That's not there anymore, alas. But it is now 27 years since he passed away, but it's obvious that the popularity of his songs hasn't diminished at all, since he keeps selling. His CDs nowadays keep selling very well. And this is his second album. It is a 1970s pressing, but the album is from 1965. I have many favorite Cornelis albums, but if I had to pick one, I think I would pick this one. Top class.